In the quiet, picturesque town of Pinehill, the gruesome murder of Jennifer Johnson sent shockwaves through the community. What appeared to be a peaceful, close-knit suburban enclave was shattered by a crime of passion and betrayal that revealed the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic lives. The lives of two couples, Daniel and Linda Garner, and Mark and Jennifer Johnson, intertwined in ways that would lead to obsession, deceit, and ultimately, murder. Daniel Garner was a respected architect known for his charming demeanor and seemingly perfect marriage to Linda, a dedicated school teacher. Mark Johnson, a successful financial advisor, and his wife Jennifer were the Garners' closest friends. The two couples shared more than just neighborhood barbecues and weekend getaways. They also engaged in a consensual wife-swapping arrangement that initially brought excitement and novelty to their lives. However, beneath the surface of this unconventional lifestyle, dangerous emotions were brewing. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer grew into an all-consuming obsession, one that Linda, his wife, was painfully aware of. Jennifer, sensing the intensity of Daniel's feelings, decided to put an end to the arrangement, not realizing the deadly consequences her decision would provoke. Daniel and Linda Garner had been married for 10 years, and from the outside, their marriage appeared to be a model of stability and happiness. Daniel was a successful architect known for his innovative designs and charismatic personality. Linda, a third-grade teacher, was beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. They lived in a charming house on Maple Street, surrounded by a well-tended garden that Linda took great pride in. Mark and Jennifer Johnson moved to Pinehill 5 years ago and quickly became friends with the Garners. Mark, a financial advisor, was outgoing and affable, always the life of the party. Jennifer, with her striking beauty and magnetic personality, was equally popular. The Johnsons brought a new dynamic to the neighborhood, and their friendship with the Garners blossomed over shared interests and mutual respect. The idea of wife-swapping was first brought up during a dinner party at the Garners' home. Fueled by wine and a sense of adventure, the conversation turned to the topic of open relationships. To everyone's surprise, the concept was met with curiosity rather than shock. Over the next few weeks, the idea was discussed more seriously, with all parties agreeing to boundaries and rules to ensure their primary relationships remained intact. The first encounter was awkward but exciting. Daniel and Jennifer, and Mark and Linda, exchanged partners for the night. It was a thrilling yet nerve-wracking experience, but one that left them eager for more. What started as a once-in-a-while experiment soon became a regular part of their lives, adding a spark to both marriages. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work well. Both couples appeared happier and more connected. They maintained their social activities, often hosting joint parties and going on vacations together. Their secret was carefully guarded, discussed only within the confines of their homes or during private gatherings. The novelty of the arrangement brought a sense of exhilaration, and for a while, it seemed like they had found the perfect balance. However, as the months passed, subtle changes began to surface, particularly in Daniel's behavior. He started to show an unusual amount of interest in Jennifer, often finding reasons to spend time alone with her. Linda noticed his increasing preoccupation, but chose to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. Mark, too, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. Unbeknownst to the others, Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was turning into something deeper and more troubling. He found himself thinking about her constantly, replaying their encounters in his mind and craving more time with her. What had started as a harmless adventure was slowly morphing into an obsession that would have devastating consequences for all involved. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was no longer just a thrill. It had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. He thought about her incessantly, his mind wandering to their encounters during work meetings and family dinners. His architectural projects, once his passion, now seemed secondary to his desire for Jennifer. He started to find ways to be near her, volunteering to help with tasks Mark usually handled or inviting the Johnsons over more frequently. Linda began to notice the change in her husband. At first, she attributed it to the excitement of their new lifestyle, but soon it became clear that Daniel's interest in Jennifer went beyond their agreement. She saw the pain on Daniel's face and the resolve in Jennifer's eyes. And as Daniel's anger began to boil over, his voice rising, his words turning cruel, Linda stepped out. Her voice trembled. "Daniel, stop." Her presence snapped him out of his rage. He turned, eyes wide, torn between guilt and relief. Jennifer didn't wait. She walked away, determined to end this once and for all. Linda tried to calm her husband, but deep down, she knew something had broken. That night, Daniel returned home, unraveling. His mind spiraled, rage, heartbreak, humiliation. He stopped going to work, isolated himself, spent days obsessing over Jennifer. Linda tried to reach him, but he was slipping. Meanwhile, Jennifer stayed focused, rebuilding her routine, keeping her distance. She hadn't told Mark everything, afraid of the fallout. She just wanted to be free. But Daniel couldn't let go. One evening, she returned home and found him waiting, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling. "Please, just listen." One last time. Jennifer refused. When she tried to walk past him, Daniel grabbed her arm. Tight. Painfully tight. She struggled, screamed. A neighbor heard and came outside. Startled, Daniel fled. Terrified, Jennifer called Linda. She didn't want to go to the police. Not yet. Maybe Linda could still stop him. They met the next day. Jennifer looked exhausted, defeated. Linda listened, nodded, promised to talk to Daniel. But when she returned home, Daniel was already unraveling further. Their conversation turned into a screaming match. He accused her of betrayal. And that night, something shifted inside him. He decided,
"If I can't have her, no one will."
On a cold, quiet night, Daniel broke into the Johnsons' house. Mark was out of town. Jennifer was sleeping. He crept in through a side window, a kitchen knife in hand. Her peaceful face enraged him. In a moment of madness, driven by twisted love and rage, he stood over her. She woke, saw him, tried to scream. But it was too late. Daniel silenced her cries with the blade. And after the murder, Daniel fled, hands soaked in blood. He returned home, incoherent, shaking. Linda saw him. She knew. And in that moment, driven by fear, denial, and blind loyalty, she chose to protect him. She stripped him down, washed off the blood, scrubbed the floor, bagged the clothes. Then she sat him down, forced him to recount every detail. As Daniel's voice trembled, she listened. Not as a wife, but as an accomplice. As the walls closed in on them, Linda knew they had to act fast. They needed an alibi, one that could withstand scrutiny. She called a trusted friend and calmly claimed Daniel had been with her the entire evening. It was a simple lie, but a crucial one. With the alibi secured, Linda drove to a secluded area outside of town. There, under the cover of night, she burned Daniel's blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon, silently praying that the fire would erase any trace of the crime. The police canvassed the neighborhood, questioning everyone, including the Garners. But Linda's carefully constructed alibi held firm. Daniel, though visibly distressed, managed to avoid suspicion. With no concrete leads pointing in their direction, the investigation stalled. But while they had successfully eluded the authorities, the psychological toll of the murder was profound. Daniel became increasingly paranoid, haunted by the idea that the police were closing in. He withdrew from his friends and co-workers, isolating himself in a spiral of fear and regret. Linda, though outwardly composed, was under immense strain. She became hypervigilant, watching everyone, analyzing every conversation for signs of suspicion. The weeks after Jennifer's murder were filled with tension and deception. Linda assumed the role of the stabilizer, managing Daniel's anxiety while maintaining their public facade. She watched the news obsessively, looking for any mention of new evidence. There was relief in the silence, but she knew an alibi wasn't enough. They needed a narrative. She told Daniel he should act more grief-stricken to match the community's mourning. At public gatherings and memorials, Daniel played the grieving friend, his voice trembling, eyes welling with tears as he spoke of Jennifer. Mark, broken by grief and desperate for answers, seemed moved by Daniel's apparent sorrow, never suspecting his friend's hidden role. But Daniel's guilt was a ticking time bomb. He began having nightmares, hallucinations, drinking heavily in a desperate attempt to quiet his mind. Linda, fearing he might slip up, stayed up most nights, watching him, guarding their secret. He became irritable and distant when they weren't with the Johnsons, and his conversations often veered toward Jennifer's likes and dislikes, her quirks and habits. One evening, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Linda confronted Daniel. His reaction was defensive, dismissing her concerns as jealousy. Linda, not wanting to disrupt the delicate balance they had established, let it go, but kept a closer eye on him. Her suspicions grew when she found him staring at Jennifer during gatherings, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. Jennifer, too, began to sense Daniel's growing obsession. Initially flattered by his attention, she soon found it uncomfortable. His touches became more possessive, his words more intimate than appropriate. She discussed her discomfort with Mark, who brushed it off, believing Daniel was just more expressive in his affections. Mark's nonchalance left Jennifer feeling isolated in her concerns. The turning point came during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. The couples had planned the getaway to reconnect and enjoy some time away from their routine. However, the trip only served to highlight Daniel's fixation. He monopolized Jennifer's time, insisting on taking her out on the lake alone, leaving Mark and Linda behind. The tension was palpable, and Jennifer's attempts to distance herself were met with subtle resistance from Daniel. One night, while sitting by the fire, Daniel made a comment that crossed the line. He spoke about leaving everything behind and starting fresh, just the two of them. Jennifer, shocked and unsettled, excused herself and went to bed early. Linda, who had overheard the conversation, confronted Daniel again. This time, he was less dismissive, but still refused to acknowledge the depth of his feelings. Linda's frustration grew as she realized the extent of Daniel's obsession. She loved her husband, but was increasingly aware that his infatuation with Jennifer could destroy their marriage and their friendship with the Johnsons. Despite her efforts to intervene, Daniel's behavior only became more erratic. He started to follow Jennifer outside of their arranged meetings, showing up at her yoga classes and even appearing at her workplace under the guise of casual visits. Jennifer's unease turned to fear. She confided in a close friend who advised her to distance herself from Daniel as much as possible. Determined to take control, Jennifer decided to end the arrangement altogether. She hoped that by doing so, Daniel would return to his senses and they could all move on from this chapter without causing further harm. One evening, while Mark was away on a business trip, Daniel showed up at the Johnsons' house, unannounced. Jennifer was taken aback but let him in, hoping to avoid a scene. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Daniel confessed his feelings for her, speaking of a future where they could be together openly. Jennifer, horrified, tried to reason with him, explaining that their arrangement was never meant to be more than a temporary excitement. As Daniel's declarations became more intense, Jennifer's fear turned to anger. She realized she needed to put an end to this before it destroyed her marriage and her friendship with Linda. She told Daniel firmly that their arrangement was over and that he needed to respect her boundaries and her marriage. Daniel, visibly shaken, tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Jennifer stood her ground. Over the next few days, Jennifer avoided Daniel, hoping he'd finally come to his senses. She confided in Linda, who listened with a heavy heart. Linda knew her husband's obsession had gone too far. She wanted to support Jennifer, but deep inside she felt a twisted sense of loyalty to Daniel. Linda promised she'd talk to him, try to calm him, try to stop whatever storm was brewing. But Daniel's obsession only deepened. He began showing up at Jennifer's workplace, waiting for her after hours, leaving messages filled with desperate declarations of love. Jennifer, now feeling genuinely unsafe, decided it was time to confront him one last time. Make him understand that whatever they had was over. They met at a secluded park, far from the public eye. Jennifer was composed but firm. "This ends here, Daniel. It's over. You have to let go and move on." But Daniel, wounded and furious, accused her of leading him on, of playing with his heart. Jennifer held her ground, fighting back tears. "We go back to our lives. You to Linda, me to Mark. This was never meant to last." Unbeknownst to them, Linda had followed Daniel. She stood hidden in the shadows, watching, heart pounding, as the confrontation unfolded. Then, one night, it happened. Slumped over a glass of whiskey, Daniel broke down. He confessed he couldn't live with the guilt, that he needed to come clean. Linda panicked. She pleaded with him to stay strong, to hold on just a little longer. She suggested a trip, something to clear his mind. They retreated to a secluded cabin in the mountains, hoping the isolation would give Daniel some peace and buy them time to regroup. In the cabin, Linda coached Daniel relentlessly. She rehearsed police questions, public responses, even facial expressions. It was grueling, but necessary. She was determined they would not go down. When they returned to Pinehill, they resumed their lives, projecting calm and strength. Daniel appeared more stable thanks to Linda's guidance, but cracks had begun to show. Daniel's drinking and erratic behavior hadn't gone unnoticed. Whispers spread. Neighbors began to wonder if Daniel knew more than he let on. Linda tried to quash the rumors, but she sensed the tide was turning. Then came the break. Inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi surfaced. Detective Mitchell, suspicious from the start, interviewed the Garners separately. Linda stuck to her story and Daniel tried to follow the script. But Mitchell sensed something was off. New evidence emerged. Jennifer's phone records revealed a series of desperate texts from Daniel, texts that exposed an obsessive infatuation. Mitchell called Daniel back for questioning. She laid out the phone data, the gaps in his story, the shifting timelines. Daniel began to unravel. Still clinging to Linda's instructions, he tried to stay calm. But his body betrayed him. Trembling hands, darting eyes, evasive answers. The final blow came when a neighbor stepped forward. They had seen Daniel's car near the Johnsons' home the night of the murder. The memory had stayed with them, how Daniel had acted oddly, lingering in the shadows. With enough evidence to act, police obtained a search warrant for the Garner home. Inside, forensic teams uncovered remnants of burned clothing and blood traces that had seeped into the floorboards, evidence Linda thought she had destroyed. Combined with witness accounts and Daniel's messages to Jennifer, the picture became clear. The Garners' carefully built facade collapsed. Detective Mitchell made her move. She brought Daniel in for one final interrogation. This time, she was blunt, laying out all the evidence, pressing hard. Cornered and consumed by guilt, Daniel broke. He confessed, he described his obsession, the confrontation, and the moment everything went too far. But he didn't stop there. Daniel told them everything. He exposed Linda's role in the cover-up, how she had helped him clean up the scene, dispose of evidence, and create the alibi. It was damning. Mitchell had Linda brought in next. Confronted with Daniel's confession and the mounting evidence, Linda's resolve cracked. She admitted her part, explaining it was loyalty and fear that drove her actions. She had been desperate to protect the life they built. The trial of Daniel and Linda Garner captivated Pinehill. Reporters packed the courtroom. Locals followed every development. Daniel was charged with first-degree murder, Linda with accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. Both pleaded guilty. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda, because of her cooperation and clean record, received 15 years with a chance for parole after 10. For Mark Johnson, the pain would never fully fade, but justice, long delayed, had finally been served.
If you found this story gripping, subscribe for more true crime cases that reveal the dark secrets behind everyday lives. Don't forget to like the video. It helps more people find these stories. And share this with someone who loves real-life mysteries, because sometimes the truth is more shocking than fiction.